Hi all my beautiful snowflakes out there, and welcome to this tutorial on how to make Kaveh's earrings from Genshin Impact. In this video I will show you two examples on how to make your own earrings with polymer clay, and I will just put it out there right away that I am a complete beginner when it comes to polymer clay. I have only been making 3 Kaveh test earrings before I decided to record this tutorial, so if I can make a tutorial after only 3 tries, I am confident you will have no problems making the earrings, even if you're like me who have never worked with clay before, or at least not since kindergarten. To all my experienced clay snowflakes out there, if you have any tips and tricks that can benefit in how to make Kaveh's earrings, do not hesitate to share with the rest of us. Let's help and learn together. With that said, let me guide you through on how to make your own Kaveh earrings. First of all, having baking paper underneath your clay helps preventing the clay sticking too much to the surface underneath, so I recommend having that. Here is an example of how much clay I use to make the earrings. Then you can just go ahead and roll the clay flat until you can fit the pattern on it, and until it's around 2 to 4 millimeters thick. My earrings are around 3 millimeters thick. I also recommend to grab a steel scraper to scrape the clay loose after it has been pressed down to the surface. It makes the rest of the crafting process easier. Should there have occurred a crack in the clay, you can simply just smooth it out in one direction with your finger, though it might take some tries to get which way the clay wants to go. We can now add our pattern to the clay, and the one you see here is a hand-drawn pattern I made 2 years ago when I made my first Kaveh earrings out of EVA foam, and also before I knew how to digitize my patterns. Of course, the one you can get is in one piece and digitized, and much more easier on the eyes. You will find the pattern together with the list of materials at my Ko-fi shop, linked down below. I will now show you an easy version to make the earrings with the help of rhinestones. I found these square rhinestones that I thought would be the perfect substitute for the pattern inside the earrings. But these rhinestones can't handle the heat from the oven, so therefore I will first put them in the right position and then gently press them down into the clay, so they will leave a dent so I can put the rhinestones in the right position once the clay has been baked. And even if you don't plan on adding rhinestones to your Kaveh earrings, they are still a great tool for creating the pattern as a guideline for if you plan on painting them. I will now show you how to cut out your earring, and I really do recommend that you follow along for when you cut your earring out. I start from the top rhombus form, and let me just pull up a rhombus form so I can explain better what to do. We start cutting from B to A, so away from ourselves, and then proceed to cut from C to B. And after that, go back to the two cuts meeting point, which in this case is B, to make sure that it is properly cut before removing the clay. Then continue down to the next rhombus form, start cutting from A to B and then C to B. Go back and check that all the meeting points are cut, which in this case is now where C from the first rhombus and A from the second meet, and also B from the second rhombus. Then continue on with the next part. You can see in the video how I do it, just follow along and always make sure that the meeting points are cut properly before removing the clay. I find that working in sections are much better than cutting the whole thing and then remove the clay. You will see as I go that a lot of the clay I remove leaves some remains, and that is because the clay piece you see here is not the same one as the one where I used the steel scraper. So this is a good example on why I recommend to use a steel scraper before cutting out your earring, because it makes removing the clay process a lot easier. And this is where I stop cutting on this side of the earring. I then go back to the top and work on cutting out the other side. Same steps as before. I will let you watch it so you can also see how I do it from this side, but I will speed up the process. The next part can be a bit more tricky to cut out, especially because we are losing support from the clay. And by that I mean the pieces we cut out have a tendency to move slightly due to the lack of support of the clay around the earring. So definitely take a bit more caution when you cut out the wrist. As you can see here, I have cut on the inside of the pattern, but I wait with removing the clay until I have cut on the outside of the pattern. And that's so the clay on the inside still gives support when I cut on the outside of this piece of pattern. If I had removed the clay, there was a high chance that this piece of the pattern will have cracked because it turns into a point. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of clay left due to me forgetting to use the steel scraper before adding the pattern. There shouldn't be much to clean up if you have remembered to use the steel scraper. But otherwise, after cutting the earring out, you just do a bit of cleaning if necessary. Let me show you a clip of an earring that's been cut out after the use of the steel scraper. As you can see, it is much more cleaner. You can then go ahead and remove your pattern, and since my pattern is in two pieces, I will leave one of them as a guideline for when I design the red part of the pattern inside the earring. Then I'll just do the same as I did earlier with the rhinestones. But if you know me, you'll know that I love to redesign my cosplays. I love it when people can see that I made this cosplay myself, so therefore I'm going to change the design a little bit with the rhinestones. That does not mean that this is something you should do as well. If you want your earrings to look exactly like they do in the game, you do that. If you want your Kaveh earrings to have a bit of your personal touch, you do that. If you're just here watching my video for entertainment and decide you want your own Kaveh earrings but you don't want to make them yourself, so you decide to buy them online, you do that. I'm just here to give you inspiration for your next project. How you decide to achieve it is entirely up to you. Now I've added my own design or personal touch, and all that's left is to clean up around the earring and to add a hole for the hook. And then I'll just cut out the baking paper. I'm not going to remove the earring, I'll put it in the oven with the baking paper I worked on. So while that one is baking, I would like to show you how to make the advanced version. And even though I say that, I would like to still remind you that I only made 3 earrings before recording, and that I record the advanced version first before the easy one we just saw. So just to say that if you are a beginner like me, I still think you will be able to make the advanced version if that's what you want. It takes a bit longer to make than the first one, but that's because there are more steps to it, and the clay is also pretty easy to work with, so don't be scared away from trying. The advanced version will of course also have my personal touch to it, and if my style is not to your taste, you just skip this step. But for the advanced version, instead of using rhinestones to mark out the pattern inside the earring, I will instead cut out the pattern, and of course it will be revealed later why I chose to do that. Let me show you how to cut out these patterns. I start from A to B, then C to B, then D to A, and lastly C to D, then double checking that the meeting points are cut before removing the clay. Then you just repeat the steps for the rest. Once they are cut out, go ahead and make a hole for the hook, and then put the earring in the oven. Once it has been in the oven, it is ready to be sculpted. This is how the earring looks after it has been in the oven. The first thing we are going to do before sculpting is to smoothen the surface, so please just ignore that one side I've already sculpted. To get a smooth surface, you simply just take some small pieces of clay and smooth it out with your finger. And you only need to smoothen out this part of the earring because the rest will be sculpted. Now we can get to the sculpting part, and dear Snowflakes, I'll try and explain the things I do as best as I can, but I think you will get the most out of this by observing what I do and then learn when you are sculpting your own earring. The sculpting part is really not that hard, it just takes some time to do. So dear Snowflakes, gather yourself some reference pictures, make yourself a cup of tea if that's what you drink, and then just let your creative side shine. Now let me explain what I did. I first take some clay and roll it into a saucer. I then place it on the earring as you can see in the video and cut off the remaining length. I then take two sculpting tools or spatula tools to help sculpt my saucers into a triangle. And regarding the tools, I have spent over an hour looking for their specific names, came up with nothing other than sculpting and spatula. I trust that you will give us the answer in the comments. And then I just use all the time I need to sculpt it to my satisfaction, with the help of both tools and my finger for smoothing out the surface. And here you can see my sculpting from a different angle. I'm still not done sculpting, but here you can see the process so far. Another great thing I loved about the sculpting process was that because the base of the earring had already been baked, I could lift the earring while sculpting without fearing accidentally getting the earring out of its shape. It also made the sculpting process a lot more easier, especially if there were angles I couldn't quite access with the tools while it laid down on the table. I could simply lift it up without worry. In this clip, I'm using my crafting knife to cut off the remaining clay from the sculpted part. I want the base of the earring and the sculpted part to line up around the edges, so I'm just using my crafting knife to make that possible. And here are both sides sculpted, and I'm so thrilled with how it turned out. I'm so proud of myself. The next part will be to sculpt the rhombus, and I know myself well enough that I can't sculpt them without accidentally ruining the ones I just sculpted. So therefore I am going to bake it one more time before proceeding to sculpt the rest of the earring. But first I'm going to prepare the space for the next sculpting part, so I will cut the ends of my former sausages in an angle. You can see what I mean in the video. I'm trying to cut it so it lines up with the rhombus shape. So now it has been baked for a second time, and I can now sculpt the rest of the earring, and I'll not go too much into detail on how I sculpt the rest of the earring, and you will know in a second why. Here is the final sculpting part. I chose to add a rhinestone and then sculpt around it. Now all that's left is to bake it for a third and final time before moving on to the next step. Or that's what I thought. But of course at the last step I went on autopilot and did not double check the settings for my oven before baking the earrings. So I burned them, they turned very crispy and very out of shape. I then proceeded to have a mental breakdown and a 2 days recovery from the fact that I needed to start over. But you know what? I think that was the best happy accident because I came up with a different design for the rhombus part. So here you see earring number 7, and this is the one where I smoothed the surface out first before sculpting. This earring has also been in the oven for a second time, cause again I don't trust myself to not ruin what I already sculpted. So this time I will explain how I sculpt the rest of the earring. I first smoothed out the surface except for the one where the hole is, cleaned up around the edges, and then I rolled a small piece of clay into a ball. I then placed the ball on the top rhombus part where the hole is, and then I just started sculpting, and the rhinestone you see on the second rhombus is just there as a guideline for now. But then I'll just let you watch and observe while I sculpt. Don't forget to add the hole again. Then I was really debating about putting it in the oven for a third time before sculpting the last part, but I chose to believe that I could sculpt the rest without messing up the first part. For the second rhombus and also our last sculpting part, for all the other earrings I have had a rhinestone there, but this time I chose to only have the rhinestone there as a support while I'm sculpting. I rolled another sausage, a much thinner one, and placed it in pieces around the rhinestone. I then start sculpting the last part, and it's the same method as the first rhombus. I hold my sculpting tool at an angle, and then I try to sculpt the clay with an angle and making sure the pieces are connected at the corners. And once I have a base, I then remove the rhinestone, and then I just do the final touches, and constantly making sure I'm not ruining the first rhombus. And here is how it looks, and I am absolutely obsessed with it. Now it just needs to be baked for a third and final time, and my anxiety was skyrocketing. I constantly checked the oven while it was baking. But thankfully nothing went wrong, and here are both the easy and advanced versions of the earrings. And the only thing I will have done differently is to smooth the surface for the easy version. I will have cut the earring out, then baked it, and then smoothened the surface and made the dents with the rhinestones, and then baked it for a second time. But regardless, I still love both versions, and I think everyone can make them. You can even combine them if you wish. We are not done with the earrings yet, so let's move on to the next step, and we will start with the easy version. So you all know that I will add rhinestones to my earrings because that's what I will like, but that is just an option out of many. You can paint them, add rhinestones or something completely else. When I add the rhinestones, I use some clear all-purpose glue, which is just to make the rhinestones stick before I cover the entire earring in UV resin. So while I wait for the glue to dry, I would then work on the advanced earring. For the advanced version, I choose to cut out the pattern design in the middle of the earring, as you all have seen, because I wanted it to be see-through and then sparkled up with some rhinestones. And if I had had some color to dye the resin, I will have done that as well. Like, can you imagine holding it up towards the sun and seeing the sunlight shine through the red and green bluish colors? Just like stained glass. If any of you choose to do that, you have to share it with me because I think that will look so stunning. But anyway, let me get back to what I'm doing. My biggest mistake was to do this outdoors because I am working with UV resin and it was drying really quick. But anyway, I am filling up the patterns, but only so I will have a bottom layer, because I will then add the rhinestones and only then will I fill it up. I also used the brush to get the resin out to all the corners. Then once I've filled them all up, I use my metal scraper to loosen the earring and flip it over so I can cure it on the back side. Then it's time to add the rhinestones, and I spent a really long time to figure out a design I was happy with. But once I did find a design I was happy with, I then made sure they were positioned correctly before adding the rest of the resin. And should they have moved, I used a chicken skewer to correct them. Now all there is left is to cover both versions in a layer of resin for a nice protected cover, and this time I did it indoors. I pour a bit of resin out in the middle of the earring and then I use a brush to brush it out. And I did both the front and the back side. I then cured it with my UV lamp, but I also let it cure out in the sun. Now let me show you all the earrings I made before this tutorial came to be. So this is my very first Kaveh earring I made 2 years ago out of EVA foam. And I want to thank my past self for not going through with the tutorial back then. I'm glad I chose to wait until I found some better material to work with, and so that my tutorial can be accessible to many more people. It would not have been that way if I had chosen to make the tutorial with EVA foam. And this is all the earrings I made before finally finding my style. Some of them are covered in gold leaf, one is painted, 2 are burned to a crisp, and then the final results. Thank you so much for watching my video. I really hope it gave you some inspiration on how to make your own earrings. Don't forget that you can find my pattern in my coffee shop. The pattern includes not 1 but 2 different patterns of the earrings and a list of materials with pictures so you know what to use. You will find a link to my coffee shop down below. If you can't support me on my coffee shop but still wish to support me, you can do that here on YouTube by liking the video, leave a comment, click the share button and copy the link, and save the video to your watch later or one of your other playlists for 24 hours. Then you have helped kicking the algorithm into doing its work and made sure that this video will reach out to many more creative people. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me that you took time out of your day to watch my video, and I hope I'll get to see you again. You are more than welcome to join the Snowflake family. If you do end up making your own earrings by the help from my tutorial, please share with me. It's a huge joy and motivation for me to make more tutorials. And with that said, I guess all there's left to say is let's keep crafting and go beyond.